everyone. Welcome back to the Exhaustion Epidemic, a free online series. And I'm your host, Heather Russell, a health coach and herbalist, and I am passionate about helping women with their health and wellness so that they live lives they love. This free online series is going to help you move through burnout, overwhelm, and exhaustion into an amazing amount of energy. And I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. It's Dr. Emily Hecker, and I'm excited to have her on the show today. A pilot and a meteorologist turned functional medicine chiropractic physician, Dr. Emily Hecker has over a decade of clinical experience unraveling the stories of women who suffer from chronic fatigue, depression, and unsolved medical mysteries. She's the founder of Geneius Food Formula, a popular, well-balanced, anti-inflammatory ketogenic diet, and patients seek Dr. Emily out on her extensive knowledge in MTHFR, histamine intolerance, and biotoxin illness. Wow. Welcome to the show, Dr. Emily.
Hello, Heather. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you to talk about exhaustion. So many people deal with it.
And you see this so much in your practice, especially from women. Tell us more about this.
Yes, I see this so much. I would say depression, fatigue are one of the top things that I see symptom-wise that patients come in with me. And I see patients for lots of different things. And it's so consistent. It's out there. And the cool thing is we can screen some of the stuff off the bat first, which is where functional medicine comes into play, which is what I do. And we can screen some of that with the specialty diagnostic tests.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So in the modern medical world, you go to your primary care doc, right? And you do your standard labs, which are super important to do. And within the functional world, what we're trained on doing is we're looking at those specialty tests that are not typically run in the modern medical world. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at tests that are really state of the art. They're not approved by insurance yet because they're so new. The technology is so amazing with it. And the tests that I can run through a few of them with you if you'd like to, that I typically look at. And to be honest with you, the first one that I look at is a standard test that you would get from your primary care doc. So maybe you're someone out there listening to this and you have not worked with a functional medicine provider or a health coach. You're just really interested in learning more about this, and you can take this information with you, go to your primary care, request a CBC, which is a complete blood count. Look at a CMP, which is going to be more information about how the kidneys are working. One of the things I think is really important to look at within a CBC and a full iron panel, I can't forget to mention that, Heather, because, oh my gosh, so many women are dealing with this fatigue and they don't even realize they're iron deficient. And this really goes back to a question is, how heavy are your periods? Mm-hmm. Are you someone that's regularly cycling and you have lots of heavy periods? Mm-hmm. If you are, then you're losing lots of blood. And one of the things you need to make blood, there are two of them, there's B12 and you need iron. Those help make a red blood cell. And when you have a red blood cell, that carries the oxygen molecule on it, just like a raft in the pool. And it just delivers that oxygenation to the body and to your brain. So if you're someone watching this and you're like, man, I want to get this fatigue, this exhaustion, I'm sick of it, make sure you run a standard CBC. And if you find any functional medicine provider, they can help you get that testing as well.
I think that's really interesting, just to interrupt you, because we know, it's like we lack energy, you should go take, get a B12 shot, go take a B12 supplement, but rarely is iron even like approached with women. So that's incredible.
Yeah, I see it a lot, believe it or not. And it's something that's very commonly held. It's, I see people come into me because they want this really in-depth workup. And the first thing we do is we go back to basics. I mean, basics. We got to look at diet, which we'll get to in a bit. And we got to look at, you suffering some anemias. Anemia means lack of oxygen. You don't have oxygen, your brain, your body is not going to work.
Mm-hmm. All right. I know that you were just talking about the test really briefly and about, I really love, so I heard one time that, you have a health team. It's not just, you just have a doctor, but you have a health team that helps you recover your health or keeps you maintaining your health. And which is why I really love functional practitioners like yourself, because it is part of that full team. And I love that you just said, for people who are maybe a little bit hesitant to not always consult with their conventional doctor, their primary care practitioner, that you were like encouraging it, because it's a health team.
That's so right. You have to look at everyone that's working with you as a team approach. And I invite that, so I encourage patients of mine to, to start that conversation, when you go to your primary care or their OBGYN, that's running hormones on them or whatnot, just to say, I'm working with a functional provider. Believe it or not, we're getting more accepted in the world today. There's a lot more science that's being published that validates the testing, that validates the nutrition, that validates the diet, and the supplements that we do as functional providers that gets results.
Yeah. And then you didn't become ill, manifest a disease, create exhaustion or overwhelm just by one thing. So, you would need to look at many different avenues on how to get how to heal yourself and pull yourself out of that state. So that would, so it would make sense. One thing didn't get you in, one thing is not going to get you out.
That's so true. And I have a little bit of story myself because I'm a mom of two. I have two young boys. They're 7 and 8, and my husband travels for a living. And when they were born, oh my goodness, he was gone all the time, and they were close in age. They're 18 months apart. I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I couldn't manage getting up at night. When one kid was crying, I couldn't figure out why. You know what I would do? I would go eat the Hershey bars that were hidden in the back closet that I saved from Halloween. And I've been there. I've been there. I live it. I do this for a living, but I'm human. And I can see that we get into these bad patterns and we look for the best sort of thing to help comfort us. And so this is why working with a team, working with a health coach, working with a provider is so important, for your journey to figure out what's going on, just get that boost to support. But the thing that I love, I'm such a science nerd. And I love this because, I have my background, in aviation and meteorology, but God was saying, you know what, Emily, I'm going to push you towards this functional medicine piece. And I absolutely adore it because we get to use these specialty tests. And one of the other tests that I wanted to mention with you is a micronutrient test is something that if someone is considering, okay, well, what tests, should I do if I am feeling so horrible? I do have a good handful of here to run by you, but a micronutrient test is a great one to look at what nutrients your body is absorbing from the food that you're eating or that you're not eating. Because if your absorption rate is not looking good, like you have stress, who doesn't have stress in our lives today, that thins the lining of the digestive tract, which makes it unable to absorb things like your B12 that you might find from your primary care doc. The thing also with your looking at your labs is we look at different ranges in the functional model. We want to compare you to healthy people instead of everyone out there that's in the hospital that has thyroid disorders, that has diabetes. We want to make sure that you are compared to healthy people. And that's something very specific that functional medicine providers do, because you might be had some tests and saying, oh, you're fine. But realistically, no, we're looking at the pre-state of getting into health, of ill health with that. So a micronutrient test is something that your primary care doc may not know 100% about, but your functional medicine doc would. There's a great test to see what nutrients are being absorbed inside of your cells and then outside of your cells. That will tell us really how to make a specific recommendation of nutrient support customized for you.
Customized. Who doesn't love personalization, especially for their health, right?
Oh, you read so much stuff now, on social media and just on the blogs that you read, like what can really specialize for you, and doing specialized testing is another test, especially dealing with exhaustion and fatigue, is going to be, in my case, you have to consider mold. And this is interesting because I started doing this. I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I'm finding that more patients people pop up in my office dealing with histamine issues. And when I say histamine, this might ring some bells for you or the listener that's watching this, but this histamine issues affect almost every system of the body. So we're talking itchiness, we're talking hives, we're talking headaches, so many people that have headaches nowadays, and there's a lot of reasons why they're from, but headaches are one symptom. You can have digestive distress. You can have heart palpitations. So there's all these different aspects that histamine can be involved with. And what happens is I have to screen them to see if there's actually been a mold exposure. And this can cause extreme fatigue. I mean, extreme fatigue. So looking at exposure to water damaged buildings, if you visited somewhere, if you live in a home, if you think it's been remediated, there's a lot to go on with mold and exhaustion and fatigue.
Wow, that's incredible. Because I know that when, most people are like, oh, I have allergies. And then, they'll go get allergy medication, or a doctor will run an allergy test. And I want to say, if I recall correctly, that mold, was one of the things that they would test for, but it really wasn't extensive. It's like not really kind of a go-to thing. So that's so interesting, especially because so many parts of the country really experience so much rain, not here in California, but other parts of the country, like, where you were and on the East Coast, and there was mold growing on the trees and in people's houses. And, it's like, where's that remediation? Because I don't know, well, you tell me, like, how do people really realize how terrible that is for your health? Like how that can affect your health and your energy?
I really don't think they do, unless they get so sick that they're trying to figure out what's going on with them. And a lot of times there is genetics involved, where you're living with your family and you start feeling horribly anxious or fatigued, or just some crazy symptoms that people can't figure out. And your husband is fine. And it's like, what's going on here? Until you get to the bottom. His genetics are processing those molds just fine. And his toxin, his liver is not as damaged as yours is. And so, yes, that's a problem. Other people that might find more susceptibility to mold are people who are in schools, so teachers, and churches as well. So they have flat tops for roofs. Lots of schools do. And water will sit on the top of those roofs and seep in. And you get leaks in places. And I'm so lucky to be working with my kids' school right now. They're so open to environmental health of their school and looking at clean air filters. So air filtration is huge when we're looking at mold. So that can be even a little takeaway tip for you if you're watching this and you feel like you've been exposed to something. If your home is, had the water damage, look at a really quality air purifier that's going to be HEPA filter. Get some clean air going in your lungs.
Oh my goodness. That's more important than ever too, just from all the environmental,
Right.
pollutants that we have also. So that's really good to know about decreasing that mold.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So then after, so then if you did these tests, like where would you go next? Unless you had another test.
Yeah. So after we go through the tests, we go through those, but we also have to address the diet. And that's a huge piece of it, and what to eat and when to eat are big things, especially when we're looking at going through the test and working with patients to get them feel better, to give you energy. Because that's what this is about, is, to look at that, give you that vibrancy that you're wanting to feel. So I do want to touch a little bit on fasting, believe it or not, because that is the when to eat piece. And I think this is a big player, especially now at this time of the year in the spring. If you are fasting for Lent, or if you've heard it, if it's something that's preparing you for Easter that's coming up. So fasting, there's a lot of benefits to it. And it's so funny because it's so biblical and it's so historical, and it does so many things for our body that science is now validating the support for it. So I love fasting because it helps women, particularly who have been on repeated diets, yo-yo diets. And maybe this is you've been fatigued, you don't know what to eat, you just don't eat, and then you eat a ton, and then you just go on, some just roller coaster type of eating, some binging, whatever it may be. So fasting is something that is being used in Canada, actually, as we speak, to help low income diabetic patients who are unable to have the finances to pay for these high end medications, to help them lose weight, to help them get their diabetes under control. I mean, the science is there with this, and it's working and it's helping. And I physically do this. This is one of my personal things I love to do and experience. I've been researching this for over a year now with fasting, with the physiological benefits of it, but it can really help make ketones. So when you don't eat for a period of time, whether it's 8 hours, whether it's 12 hours, whether it's 24, whether it's 5 days, you are burning fat for fuel. Your body is shifting your fuel source. So think of it like this. You have a car that you're driving around with the normal 100 low lead gas that you put in, and then you all of a sudden take out your gas tank and put in a diesel. It takes totally different gas to put in diesel. You don't put diesel in your car when you're driving around if it's not diesel. This is what switching over to ketones, burning fat for fuel, does for your body. You have to switch over, and sometimes it takes a little getting used to switching that process over instead of burning sugar. Mm-hmm. So that's what we normally do. We live in, if you're fatigued, that's one of the things and questions I look for is, what are you eating and how frequent are you eating? Are you eating way too many carbs? Because carbs turn into sugar, and that sugar burns out fast, man. And one of the reasons, one little key tips that I find out, because I have 2 young ones, if I fall asleep in bed with my kids when I'm putting them to bed, like around 7:30 or 8, I know I've had too much carbs for the day. That's my limit of, okay, we know that it was a little bit too much. I'm not supposed to fall asleep at that time of the day. I don't need to get exhausted then. But people tend to go up and down, whether they're drinking coffee to get the energy, then you come down from that high, and then next thing you're grabbing for the Oreos, or you're grabbing for the candy, to get you that sugar high again. And so we go through these periods of up and down, regulating with caffeine and sugar, when we really just need to be eliminating that altogether. So ketones is something super easy for your body to get into making, that helps with brain clarity, with fasting, as well as a ketogenic diet, which I really support.
So do I. I've been keto for about 5 years, and I started intermittent fasting about 2 years ago, and it is the energy surge, and so I had migraines, and really it's like brought my migraines down next to nothing, where I would suffer for a couple of at least twice in a month, for a couple of days. So really I can attest to what you're saying here about how those two combined really help with so many areas of your body and your life. It improves your life quality of life.
It really does. And it's funny, because I got into the ketogenic diet because I was working with a certain dietary approach where it was more of a restricted food program. So it was a calorie restricted program. It was about a 500 calorie program, and people did see great results with it. They did. But this was the deal, Heather. They would gain it back.
Yeah.
They would gain it back in a few months, or if not a few years. And it really made me investigate what's going on with these calorie restricted diets versus fasting. Mm-hmm. And so what the beauty of this is that those who suffer with those yo-yo types of diets with that, what fasting does is it resets the metabolism. So instead of lowering your metabolism to match the amount of caloric intake that you're consuming, so say you decide, I'm just going to cut my calories, and do that. It's your metabolism is eventually going to catch up with you and be like, oh, okay. All right. We'll slow down for you, because we see what you're getting at,
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you start eating again, because maybe you're done with your diet, and bam, you're gaining more weight than ever, and you're fatigued, and you're crabby, and so it's this cycle. So if we bring in just fasting, just not eating for a period of time, and then when you're done with that fast, eat normally. Indulge in those good, healthy ketogenic fats. You need protein as well. That's another thing that's really important to make sure that you're gaining of, because fatigue-wise, I see this a bit too, that people come in either vegetarian or vegan, but they're not getting the B vitamins from the meat, and they're not supplementing properly, and so they come back anemic, and they're fatigued. And so we need to make sure we're getting, if you are a vegan or vegetarian, getting plant sources of protein in, but making sure that you are getting that B12, because that's really important in a process called methylation. Mm-hmm. And that methylation is something that you might have heard this term, your listeners might have heard this term, or this gene called MTHFR. It's a mouthful, MTHFR, but it really is how your body converts B vitamins, specifically foliage. Leafy greens, salads, how it converts those good greens into something usable for your body to work. Now, half of us have a genetic defect where it doesn't work that great. That gene is, I call it like a factory. The factory is slowed way down because what mom and dad gave us, what we're exposed to environmentally from the epigenetic resources that are impacting us, whether it's air pollution or stress or parasites, or things like that. So MTHFR is something that we need to be aware of. And that's where I find lots of patients seek me out because of wanting to figure out what to do. I have this MTHFR. One of the things we need to do is we need to eat accurate amounts of B vitamins and protein in our body, and we need to support liver. That's a big deal.
Yeah, because your liver processes, everything, right? It has to filter out whether or not it's a chemical or it can be broken down, right?
Yeah. Even that glass of wine that you might have had this past weekend, it does have to filter those toxins out in all your blood, even hormones, which is something that could be making you or your listeners feel fatigued, is the hormones need to be filtered out properly. And if you're not, and your liver and gallbladder, if you don't have a gallbladder, they're not working very effectively. So their job is to make bile and then store it and then squirt it out as you eat fibrous foods, which is why we need to have fiber in our diet, like leafy green vegetables. We need to have that fiber as like a sticky glue ball, really, to stick on to the toxins, the hormones that are coming out of your body so you can poop it out, really. So we need to have good elimination going on and included to help the liver work better, to help the digestive tract work better, so you can feel more vibrant and healthy and happy.
You do. Either that or it's getting back up in your system, and then then it's even more, right? Then it's like the cycle repeats itself where you're trying to eliminate toxins, but they get stuck, and then it just recycles itself in your body.
It really does. It really, really does. And so we need to be more aware of bringing binders in to our daily practice. And this is something that I really feel it should be talked a little bit more about, is binders. And binders can be activated charcoal. They can be apple pectin. It can be bentonite clay. I see this a lot with my mold patients because they don't have the availability genetic wise to help bind out these toxins and get them out of their body. But think about all the pesticides and things we're exposed to on a daily basis now. We live in a toxic world, and we need to bind this stuff up and get it out instead of not pooping and recirculating all these things that are being sprayed everywhere and consuming or breathing in, whether it's you're in church or you're at the mall, or we need to be able to clear this stuff out of our body. So binders are something that could be brought in as well to help support your healing.
Agreed. And then, but nothing beats a healthy diet. And if you are eating processed food, it doesn't matter, what, let's say, dietary philosophy you subscribe to, you're not healthy. So, the ketogenic diet is, has been talked about for the last really 5 years, really, solidly, especially in the last 2. And I have seen so many people eating really unhealthy keto. And, it's almost like when Dr. Atkins, had originally came out and people just weren't eating any veg. And it's like, no, it's about being healthy and making your body run as efficiently as possible. So I wanted to talk to you about, your take on the ketogenic diet and how you're prescribing it to patients. And then
I love this so much, Heather, that I've created my own program called the Geneius Food Formula. And this is a ketogenic way of eating that's anti-inflammatory. It is going to be DNA. It's going to help express your DNA, help express your genes. So it's going to be high in magnesium, high in those B vitamins that we need for if you have MTHFR, if you do, or if you know that you need that liver support. So it's going to have that. It's also going to be restrictive in the fact that it has those inflammatory foods, like you said, unclean keto. Some people have the keto that man, they're just not eating, maybe eating sticks of butter. They may see that online, and it's just like, no, we can be a lot different than that. We can still eat our leafy green vegetables and be very healthy keto eaters. But my Geneius Food Formula program, I've made for patients. I've made it just to educate people on how the best way of eating that I see good results with clinically with patients are. So I do have this program as a free download for your listeners, but it doesn't include dairy. And that might be something that your listeners may be like, oh, I do keto all the time, and you can find some great keto dairy recipes, but maybe you don't tolerate dairy well. And maybe that's something you do need to remove from your diet, especially if you're listening to this, because you might be fatigued. Mm-hmm. So this does not include the dairy. It doesn't include nuts is either. because that can be inflammatory. So the purpose of my Geneius Food Formula, it's kind of like a 3-in-1. It removes things. It's elimination style diet. It's going to help get you some weight loss too, from fat loss, if that's something that is a goal of yours. And it gets you understanding macros, which is something commonly talked about within keto, or maybe that's too overwhelming and macros, you don't want to deal with that. You can still at least look at the foods that you're supposed to be eating, consume those healthy foods so you can start getting your energy back and getting healthier than you are now.
And we certainly have a lot more food allergies today because of the way that our food is grown. So I like that you were just talking about elimination diets, even on keto, just to see where you have all of those sensitivities.
Right. There's things going on, and no matter what diet that you're working with, you can flare, or you can have histamine issues if you're eating keto, because maybe you're eating a lot more pepperonis and cheeses with that, and those are going to be fermented foods and cause more histamine issues. Or you're a wine drinker, so that can be something that we look at in a functional perspective to say, okay, what's going on? How can we clean things up? How can we settle this inflammation down, and regain your brain function? I think that everybody is concerned about that as we age. We don't want Alzheimer's. We don't want dementia. What can we do to preserve our brain? I'm fasting right now. I do the best at my podcast interviews or my summit interviews, or when I'm blogging, I do the best in a fasted state because my brain works fast. And so that's important to me. I picked that up. So I'm excited to share this with you and to share it with your listeners to see if they can take some takeaway tips from this, whether to look for a provider to work with, whether to implement just one little change, get a clean air filter, or to really embark on a good, clean, ketogenic way of eating. There's a lot that you can do.
Yeah, you've given us like so many amazing tips and tricks, and it's like, the one thing that you could do to like reduce your stress levels now is, and then you just fasting.
It's up to you. It really is up to you to figure out what your body can tolerate at this time.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to ask all of my speakers, because I'm always interested in what you do for your, like a daily ritual, self-care, really, that kind of like, without it, you can't start your day. Because I know really as we women become busier and busier and have to juggle priorities with family and work and our own lives, it's hard to fit in a self-care program. And if it's not perfect, or they're comparing it to someone else, right? But, it's just like to start someplace. So I would love to know yours.
Yes, it's so good. And you know what? It changes. I'll be honest with you. It changes as I go, and as summer's here and the kids are out of school and when they're in school, but I always try to find something that is going to be good for me, that I can take that time and spend some time for me, because being a practitioner, owning a business, it gets stressful, and so many of us deal with the stress. A few of the things that I really partake in is making sure that I get to my weekly yoga. I love yoga done at my church. They do a fantastic job at it. And what I love about the yoga is it takes you and it gets you breathing. So it gets you get you oxygen, right? So I really make sure I partake in my weekly yoga in there. Something else that I like to do at least 2 times a week. After I put my kids to bed, I go into the sauna. I have an infrared sauna in my house I'm so glad I got one, because it really stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And it gets you in a good detox sweat. I hydrate when I'm in there. It gets me nice and sleepy, and I can cuddle into my nice warm bed and take a wonderful night's sleep. So sauna care, yoga care. I also have been reading the Bible. This is a new learned habit that I'm doing. I'm taking the time to see and address my spirituality. So setting that 15 minutes aside and addressing certain books within the Bible. That's something that I've been doing personally. So those are some of my healthy habits that I've been incorporating.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes.
So we are about wrapped up for time. You've imparted so much information. I just love it. Thank you so much. Did you have anything else that you think would be important to share with the audience, in addition to letting them know how they can reach you and also learn about the Geneius Formula?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. If you want to follow me, I am social. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm on both of those at the same handle at Dr. Emily STL. And you can also find me on my website, which is enlightenstl.com. I'm in St. Louis. I'm in the Midwest. And so I look forward to seeing you. You can see and learn about my ketogenic diet at geniusfoodformula.com. That genius is spelled with an extra E, Geneius. And so that's all from me. Thanks so much, Heather.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then to the listeners, I will have all of Dr. Emily's information and the links to her gift that she is generously offering you, and as well as ways to contact her listed right below this interview, so you have that at your reference. So I appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow.